I first got introduced to Gustav Stickley in about 1977, and I was a sculpture major at Syracuse University, and the minute I saw a piece of mission oak furniture, I totally forgot about sculpture and went into this almost full time. By 1980, I was doing shows, and 81 opened up the shop, and the rest is history. The piece that I'm going to be highlighting is this piece. That was produced between 1900 and 1901, maybe mid-1901, and it is Gustav Stickley, obviously, but the hardware, I believe, was purchased in London in 1890, in the late 1890s, when he took a trip to England. He was there a couple of times, and he was buying odds and ends and some china and things like that. But it's the only piece, the only form like this that has this type of hardware on it. And you can see it's like so different than what you would typically see on a Gustav Stickley piece. It's quite decorative. So this has kind of been my my Bible, but this wasn't published until 1996. So in the early years, I had a friend in Boston who came across, he was a ephemera buyer, and he bought a lot of original Gustav Stickley catalogs, and he Xeroxed them all for me and sent them to me. So I've got a file of, Xeroxes from, probably 83, I think I started getting them. So this is just a little closer shot. So this has interesting construction. These sides are a full 2 inches thick, and going horizontally down the center of this is a 4-inch wide board or 3-inch wide board that is buried in the side, and then it's veneered over the top. And that was to keep the sides from warping, because these thick slabs of wood were all kiln dried, but occasionally they didn't get all the way to the center, and you see a lot of wood that would have been warped. But I think this and maybe one other piece is the only piece I've seen this happen on. The butterflies are typical of this form. This is a very rare book cabinet. I think there's like 5 known examples. I bought this cabinet in Saranac Lake out of a camp, and the person was fully aware of what it was and its value, and we did well with it. This piece is actually now at the Dakota in Manhattan, in an apartment there. So you can see, I don't know, you can see the mitered mullions in the doors where they join. It's where the mullions meet, and they're all mitered so that they all meet in the center. This was done around 1903. Gustav Stickley grandfather clock, and this one's early also. This is about 1905. You can see the S carved here, and that was for Stickley. So this was the model clock that they had at Craftsman Farms, which they just got the original one back. It was on Block Island and owned by the Farney family, the people that bought Craftsman Farms from Gustav Stickley. This piece was designed by Lamont Warner, and Sam showed a picture of a house designed by Lamont Warner. This was why he was working there, and this is quite a rare cabinet. There's maybe 3 or 4 known examples. I know there was a couple of these that one went through Christie's and one went through Sotheby's in the last 10 years, and I think they both broke 250,000. So we got this and a server in Plattsburgh, New York, just this summer, and I've got a picture of the server later on. But you see the glass, which is a little atypical of his glasswork. Usually it was diamond panes or just square panels. But I think that's a direct Lamont Warner influence. So nice hammered iron hardware on this. The hammered copper hardware wasn't quite as available, or I find more hammered iron hardware on earlier pieces than I do copper. That's what I'm trying to say. And this is a square butt hinge. You know, a lot of the hinges that you see, the strap hinges, are fake on L&JG furniture and on Gustav Stickley furniture. They would put a hinge in and then take put a regular hinge on and then take a strap and attach it to the wood starting here and going across, which I always found kind of interesting. And this is the construction of the inside of the cabinet door. And to use the pyramid screws, which was kind of a signature of his, I found kind of interesting that he buried them inside the cabinet. This is 1902-03. Yeah. So this is the sideboard that came with that china cabinet. And this has really heavy wood pulls. And this is quite large. It's about 60 inches long. The mark on the back of this is the 1902-3 decal. And you can date Gustav Stickley's furniture with the mark. He changed it every few years. So this is right when it first got into the back room of my shop. And you could see the chamfered boards on the sides and the heavy hardware. Through tenon construction. And this is the picture in the catalog that I showed you a few slides ago. This is a cabinet in our collection, and it's a good size. It's a 56-inch tall cabinet. It looks tiny here against this wall, but it's unusual because it is an early example. Again, probably 1902-3. And it does not have a kickboard on the bottom, as most cases did. And it has the mitered mullions that I was trying to explain earlier. That's what that looks like. So after about 1905, they would just lock these two together with the horizontal going over the vertical and call it a day. The nicely shaped keyed tenons, all true tenons. The keys are actually functional, holding the case together. This is a Gustav Stickley hex table with the original leather, and the important aspect of this was the construction. It had the stacked stretchers, which was pretty complicated to do. I think that after a few years, he was making stretchers that looked more like a wagon wheel, that they all met in the middle. This is a Gustav Stickley 2342, which is the model number of the early version, and it's one of my favorite Morris chairs. It's just like simple, flat arms. It's anchored to the floor beautifully. And these happen to be the original cushions. And they're done in mohair, which lasts forever. This is called the Eastwood table. Gustav Stickley was known for naming some of his pieces after areas of Syracuse. So he had the Thorndon chair, the Eastwood table, and a couple of others that I don't come to mind right now. But this is a piece that shows some interesting construction where they took the legs all the way through the top and cut them flush with the top, and then drove wedges. I think you can see it a little bit in this one. You can see a piece there and there. And what that would do is that would expand the top of the leg and lock it into the top. This is the Tree of Life stand, and it was designed pretty early, probably as early as 1898, and then was marketed through the Toby Furniture Company in Chicago. The original had a little bit different design on the side. It was more like a lollipop design, with but it was still an organic flower. And they used to put these leather strips on the fronts of the shelves, and they would hang down under the shelf about a quarter of an inch, and supposedly that was to keep dust from going from the top of one shelf sliding down into the shelf below. Not quite sure how well it works. The little decorative corbels underneath the top, and this kind of almost an Art Nouveau whiplash effect on the skirt underneath the top. And Gus primarily used quarter sawn white oak, but he did make some things out of maple and some things out of mahogany. Those were other two woods that were used in the factory. This is a corner cabinet, and this is a little bit later. This is a 1905 to 1912 piece, but it shows beautiful workmanship, great hardware, and they're quite rare. This was a manufactured piece, so there might be, I mean, I've only seen maybe, I don't know, 8 to 12 of these. And a lot of times they were different too. Sometimes they left the mullions out and they did leaded glass in the doors. But they were expensive when they were made. You know, they were way beyond the means of an average worker. So this is a later piece. This is what I talked about, the mullions and how they overlap. This has iron hardware. Kind of a common piece that you would, see. This is the mark on the inside of that door, and you could tell by the way the signature is when it was produced. This was 1905 to 1912. A Gus trestle table. This is an early trestle table done around 1903, but kind of colonial revival in its form. And then we have I have a bunch of Morris chairs to show you. So that is a drop arm. This is the drop arm, and it gets the name from having that slope. It starts off flat and slopes to the back. This is a bow arm, where they actually took the wood. To produce this, they would have bandsaw cut part of the arm, and then cut the bottom of the top of the arm off and glue it to the bottom, and then shape the arm, and that would help with making the bow without having too much stress in the whole piece. This is the 332, the later version of the 2342 I showed you earlier. Flat arm. And I don't think there was an arts and crafts furniture company that didn't produce some version of this. I want to think that it was all kind of copying this model. But I'm not sure how else you would make one. And then later on, things started to, he started to get into a pinch, and so he started producing some of these open arm chairs. This one was probably done around 1912. Because it has the through tenons coming through the arm. And this one lacks all the through tenons, so this was probably 1915 to 16. So there was one designer that I left out, and that was Harvey Ellis. And Harvey Ellis was with Gustav Stickley only for about 9 months, and he passed from a liver disease. But this one had the 1902-04 mark on it, and those were That was during the years that Ellis was working. So this is another Ellis piece. This is in our collection. And you can see the inlays, and the inlays are made out of primarily pewter and then different woods and copper for the inside of the medallions. And I'm also showing this piece only because it's got unique hardware on it. It's the only desk. This is not a real uncommon desk. There's, you can find at least one a year. But the hardware on this is much more decorative, if you could believe that, compared to what was originally put on there. Ellis worked there when Lamont Warner was there and when Wilkinson was there. But you can usually tell the design, the designs were always monogrammed. And from the design, from the paperwork, and I think all these images, all these drawings that were found, or 99% of them, are actually down at Winterthur. And they would have their monograms on the designs.